Well everyone, I'm glad to see July. May and June, I've just coughed my way through. I was just getting better and then that nasty bug that everybody's talking about got me and laid me low again for a little while. I'm feeling much better now. Still a little tired, but I've got all this enthusiasm to get back and being out there doing my bit for the war effort. Well, at the beginning of this month, I was asked to go to the Isle of Wight. They wanted me at the railway station at Haven Street to talk to the public about fuel saving in the kitchen. Now I know that you're going to say, fuel saving? In the summer? I'm saving fuel anyway. I'm burning no coal on the fire. It's far too hot for that. Well, yes, it is. But don't forget, every time you turn on your electric oven or that gas oven, what are you doing? You're burning coal. Because of course that's where our electricity and town gas comes from the burning of coal. And coal is our most precious commodity. Every lump of coal is needed at the moment to keep those furnaces burning, producing the steel, and those machines running as many hours of the day as possible, making our war weaponry that our lads are depending on. So every time you switch on your oven to cook, you too are burning coal. Many of the public at the railway station were very interested to hear how they could still cook delicious meals but using a fraction of the fuel they would normally use. So I'm going to put my preaching into practice today and use the Haybox to cook our supper. And with today's weather, with this unbearable heat, I just couldn't face turning my hot plates on or the oven on, putting out all that heat into the kitchen because it's lovely and cool in here at the moment. So to minimise the amount of time cooking, of course, the Haybox will be a godsend. Of course, you don't just have to use the Haybox for specific recipes for Haybox cookery, like in this book. As long as you know the basic rules, you should be able to cook anything in your Haybox that either has liquid within the dish or has liquid around it, such as a boiled or steamed dish. All you need to remember is that however long that dish normally would take, cooked on the hot plate or in the oven, only cook it for a third of its usual cooking time to get the heat into the food. And then the rule is to keep it in the Haybox for 3 times its usual cooking time. So today I'm going to try one of our favourite dishes, Commando Casserole. Now that normally takes about 50 minutes in the oven. So that'll have about 15 minutes bringing the gravy up to the boil on the hot plate, and then it'll be in my Haybox for about 3 hours. But first of all, I'm just going to clean up some of my homegrown potatoes that I've just dug out of the garden. Now unfortunately, they've got these horrible scabs over the top, so when I'm at my next produce guild meeting, I'm going to ask the Dig for Victory specialist what this is all about and how I can avoid it next time. Now for your casserole, you're going to need about a pound of potatoes. I've just cleaned mine up, and a pound of root vegetables. Now you could use a pound of parsnips, but I don't have parsnips. I've got some carrots and a kohlrabi from the garden, so I'm going to use about a pound in weight of that. I'm going to use about 3 or 4 cabbage leaves, either a leek or a medium-sized onion. I'm also going to use a pound of sausage meat and some salt and pepper and some herbs for seasoning, as well as some savoury extract to make some gravy. Now I'm just going to start off shredding the cabbage and slicing the root vegetables as thinly as possible. Now in the Isle of Wight we were camping and I cooked in my Haybox all weekend, but the warm weather was a little trying to keep meat and other food cool, but of course that's where having some basins, some enamel bowls and a good supply of cold water with some tea towels to put over the top, that's just what you need to keep your food cool. And none of the meat went off. We had a delicious minced shape on Saturday, which was very similar to a meatloaf, although it was boiled in a floured cloth, and I also made a steamed chocolate cake, the recipe of which is on one of my films. They needed the same amount of time, 6 hours in the Haybox for those dishes, but it did mean I could sit there and relax talking to the public whilst they were cooking without having to keep an eye on them at all. And the cake was delicious, warm with custard and then cold as slices of cake the following day. That's the leeks. And finally some kohlrabi. So there's some slices of kohlrabi to go with the rest of the vegetables. And now we need to roll out the pound of sausage meat on a floured surface to fit the size of your casserole or your saucepan if you're using saucepans in your Haybox. I've given that a little greasing just so that the food doesn't stick. There, that should fit. Now we're ready to start layering the casserole. Always start with a layer of potato on the bottom, spreading it out to cover the dish. Now add the vegetables, perhaps a sprinkling of shredded cabbage, some carrots, some of the leeks and some of the kohlrabi, and then take the rolled out sausage meat and pop that on top of the vegetables. Press it down, and then we're going to put a layer of vegetables on top of the sausage meat. Pop in the carrots, the cabbage, the onion or the leek, and the kohlrabi, and then finishing off with the layer of potatoes. Now season with salt and pepper. And add a little thyme and some sage. So chop up a little thyme, about half a tablespoon. And pop that into, and a little sage if you have that as well. And we're also going to now put in some liquid. Now we're ready to mix up some gravy using a teaspoon of savoury extract in a breakfast cup of hot water, stir to dissolve, and then we're going to pour that over the top of your prepared casserole. Add another half a cup. Make sure all that lovely extract is in with the casserole. Now I'm going to put the lid on that, and that's just going to have 15 minutes on the heat before it goes in the Haybox. So that's simmering nicely for about 15 minutes. Then I'm going to bring it up to a fast rolling boil, put the lid on, and straight into the Haybox. So there it goes, a fast rolling boil, the hay mattress over the top, and the stout fitting lid too. And there's our dinner that's sitting there cooking without any fuss. That's our supper on. 3 hours with nothing to do but sit and take it easy on a very hot day like today. I've also put in the other saucepan some swede, which should be ready at the same time. So we'll have Commando Casserole with mashed swede. So all that's left for me is to make a cup of tea, and I'm going to sit here resting my feet reading my new magazine that I've got this morning. Well, Jeeves, I wouldn't be a wartime housewife if I didn't have a disaster or two now and then, would I? Are you going to tell everyone that our supper wasn't cooked and the vegetables were still very hard and the sausage meat wasn't really cooked? I think I either didn't get enough heat in, or it needed far longer in the Haybox. Still, it didn't matter. I fried it off quickly, and it was a bit like bubble and squeak. Still delicious. But if you want to try this recipe not in the Haybox, then do exactly what I've shown you. Don't add quite so much liquid. Just a teacup will do. Pop it in, covered for 30 minutes in a moderate oven, and then take the cover off and pop it back in for another 20 minutes. Whether you succeed in the Haybox or you do it in your oven, Commando Casserole is delicious.